Hi everyone! Since I have now talked about The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter on my channel, I thought it would be an appropriate time to talk about the similarities I noticed between the two series. So this will contain spoilers for both series, so if you are not familiar with both of them, you probably should not watch that. But there are a lot of commonalities between these two series, and most of them have to do with characters, so I'm going to start with that. And I'm going to start with the good guys. So first off, we have Frodo and Harry. They are both the protagonists of the story. They're both orphans, they both live with their uncles, and they are both chosen ones. With Harry, he's chosen by a prophecy, and with Frodo, it's said that if he does not succeed as the ring bearer, then no one will. So they are both chosen ones who have to destroy magical objects in order to defeat the Dark Lord. So that's a lot of commonalities between our protagonists. You also have the trusty sidekicks, which are Sam and Ron, and they are the loyal friend who is there with the protagonist for the entirety of the story, and they do have quite a few ups and downs over the course of the story, but ultimately are always there for the protagonist, and they also find that they get lost in the hero's shadow. But don't worry, we all know that if it weren't for Sam, Frodo never would have destroyed the ring. So that's another commonality. Yet another, and I know this is one that a lot of people notice, is Gandalf and Dumbledore. What is a classic fantasy story without the wise bearded wizard to guide the protagonist along when it is convenient for them, to keep secrets from them so that they don't know exactly what's going on, and to die? That's pretty common for mentor characters, is to die. Now one of them gets resurrected and the other one doesn't, but they do both die, and then they also both know that the Dark Lord will come back and isn't truly dead, even if no one wants to listen to them. So those are the commonalities that I noticed between those two. Another one is Merry and Pippin and Fred and George. They are the comedic duo. They are constantly getting into trouble, but they have their heroic moments. And then here's one that I haven't really seen other people talk about, but that I think is a commonality, and that's Aragorn and Neville. They both start out kind of unsure and not in the role they're supposed to be in. So Aragorn is a ranger, he's supposed to be a king, but that's not what he's doing. And Neville starts out not really knowing magic and being kind of poor at it and not having a lot of friends. And over the course of the story, they really grow into the heroic character that they should be. And they're both kind of secondary protagonists. Aragorn has this strong arc of going from ranger to king, and we follow his storyline a lot, and so he feels like another protagonist. And then with Neville, he goes from being really bad at magic to being really good at magic and quite the formidable opponent. And since he destroys the final Horcrux, he has that moment kind of as a protagonist as well, where he's like another big hero in the story. And so those are some really strong similarities between those two characters, in addition to them also being friends with the main protagonist, and they get separated along the way, but then come back together and are reunited at the end. That's all I have for good guys. Now on to the other characters, which are mostly bad guys, but not entirely. And the first one is obviously Sauron and Voldemort. They are both Dark Lords who die but don't really die and then come back later on, and they're both really power hungry, and they have magical objects which give them power and make them immortal. So those are some obvious commonalities between those two. We also have Wormtongue and Wormtail, who have very similar names and are also bad guys who originally pose as good guys, and we later find out that they're not actually good guys, and they're both just kind of gross villains that no one really likes. And then Wormtongue actually gets two, because I know a lot of people think Wormtongue and Snape are similar because they're both like the greasy bad guy that no one wants to be around, and they both are attracted to a female who is on the same side as the good guys. And so that is another commonality between Wormtongue and Snape. And then one that I also have not seen very often, but that I noticed, was Denethor and Fudge. They are both leaders, and they tend to be fairly incompetent, especially upon the return of the Dark Lord. They refuse to address the issue, refuse to believe it's true, whatever, and they ultimately end up getting kicked out of their place of power. And they both choose to ignore the wise wizard who is telling them the Dark Lord is returning and that they need to be prepared for this. And the last one is Smeagol slash Gollum and Dobby. They are both strange humanoid creatures who follow the protagonist along over part of the story, and they are both a help and a hindrance, with Smeagol slash Gollum ultimately becoming a villain and Dobby ultimately becoming a hero, and they both die in the final book in the series. And then on to other similarities that aren't character-based. We have the Nazgul and the Dementors. They're both dark, creepy, hooded figures who go after the protagonist at some point during the story, and they work for the Dark Lord. Another one is Shelob and Aragog, and just big spiders in general. They both are a hindrance for the protagonists at some point in the story. And then we also have the creepy forests. We have multiple creepy forests in Lord of the Rings, and Fanghorn Forest is one, for example, and then we have the Forbidden Forest in Harry Potter. They're places the characters are supposed to stay away from, but for some reason or another, they end up having to go there at some point during the story. And then the last one I want to talk about is the One Ring and the Horcruxes. They are both magical objects, and they have to be destroyed in order to kill the Dark Lord, and they are both a really heavy burden upon the protagonist. So those are all the similarities I noticed between Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. I probably forgot some, so let me know in the comments if you noticed any that I did not include on this list. These are interesting because they show up in a lot of stories, like Star Wars has a lot of the same similarities, but they're not required for a strong sci-fi fantasy story. But it is interesting that we see these recurring elements between the different stories. So again, let me know if I missed anything in the comments. I will be interested to see if there are any other similarities between these two big franchises. And next time I will be doing the Netflix book tag. So if you want to check that out, stay tuned and come back on Tuesday. I hope you all have a great day.